So as you can see, we have a stacked lineup for you today. Before we get started, I'd like to pass it to Lady, our communication and development assistant for our events ground rules. Lady.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Lou mentioned, I'm the Communications and Development Assistant at FICGN, and I want to extend a warm welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We have an engaging session planned for the next 30 minutes, where our panel, led by Louis Matei, our host, will converse about the issues of student loan default, blocking Pell Grant access to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated students. Following that, we'll have a 10-minute question and answer session, and our goal is to conclude by 2:55 p.m. A few ground rules that I would like to go over with you. Please post your questions in this chat. We'll make every effort to address as many questions as possible. Please understand that we might not be able to cover them all, but we will try our best. If you have questions and if not addressed, we apologize in advance and encourage you to engage in the ongoing conversations. As an organization, FICGN prioritizes person-first, human-centered language when referring to currently and formerly incarcerated people. We ask that you use inclusive and appropriate language through the event, refrain from offensive or derogatory terms, and reframing discussions to focus on individuals as. Keep your microphone muted at all times unless you are asked to speak. Thank you again for being here. We're excited to embark on this journey together. Now I'll hand over the floor to Luke. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Lady. Now let's get started. So in part one of our series, we heard from past students who were forced to navigate debt rehabilitation in order to continue their education. My first question is for Lauren. Would you tell us what the admissions process looks like at the Adams State program for prospective students in default? And how does your program ensure that they are enrolled?
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here on this panel. I just started this position in January as the director of this program, and I have learned a lot since being here. And so what we do for people who are in our Second Chance Pell program, now called the Revised Experiment, when we go into the facilities, we do a college workshop to get people started, and people can sign up on that list. And on that day, when we do the college workshop, we get a list of the people who are interested in applying. And we also bring our financial aid director in twice with us. So she comes in the first time to just really explain what financial aid is to people who are prospective students. She can do it better than all of us, and she can do it way better than me. And so she comes in and then she gets a list of the people who are really interested in applying. We also gather their applications at that time. And we also will start gathering their FAFSAs at that time now. There were some complications with applying online for FAFSA with Colorado. So now we're just going to go forward with a paper application from now on. We couldn't make it work doing the online version, and can explain that process another time if anybody is interested. But so we have her come in and kind of just gather everybody's names. And then when she comes back to the office, she will run everybody's names that are interested in applying to the program so that she can find out if they're in loan default. We had 20 students who were accepted to our Second Chance Pell courses that started this spring. And out of those 27 people were in loan default. And so we knew that they were in loan default and brought her name's Heidi, our financial aid director, back into the prison with us to explain to them the process of what Fresh Start is. So she sat with them, was able to get them to sign all of the paperwork that they needed in the moment. So we didn't have to keep going back and forth, in that they didn't have things mailed to them because that's way slower. And then she was there to answer anybody's questions, which was kind of like a miracle. And that they got all the information they needed right away. All of those 7 students were able to start that spring semester through the Fresh Start program. And I'm not exactly sure how it works with payment, but for our students, they didn't have to pay to get out of loan default, which was kind of one of the coolest things that I think she was able to figure out. And then so that's how we'll do it going forward with every Pell application that we'll be getting. We're going to be in 5 facilities here in Colorado, and then in the next couple of years hope to expand further, but we will always bring along a financial aid advisor or the director. We'll have our own financial aid advisor here. The hiring process should start in a couple weeks. And we'll have our own dedicated to the PEP program financial aid advisor who'll be able to travel with us when we go outside of Colorado or into any prison here in Colorado. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things that we've implemented to make sure that we can make sure that all of the students who are in default, and for us, it seemed to be like almost half, that we can, still serve them as much as the best we can. And then once they're enrolled, they don't have to actually pay back because they're part of that forbearance when people they get their loans deferred when they're in school like everybody else does. So it works out if we can get them matriculated pretty quickly. They don't have to actually start paying back those loans while they're still incarcerated. So did I answer all the questions?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. Having a financial director in the room must be really reassuring for your students. Because I know when I was interviewing people who had gone through this, none of them had that type of experience with someone who had actual knowledge to come and sit them down and walk them through the process. So that's awesome. Dr. Andrus, you started your own SCP at Wiley College and consulted for several others. In your experience, approximately what percentage of prospective
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yes, in your experience, sir, approximately what percentage of your prospective students have passed student loans in default? And what percentage of them would you say give up on pursuing higher education when they find out that their student loans were defaulted?
Normally, we have a percentage of about 20 to 25% of the students. About 1/4 of the students that we normally serve are actually in default. And of those 25%, I would say at least, I say 10%, maybe 15, just depending on where they're located, may, just give up and say, hey, look, I can't do it. My family don't have the money to pay. Because at one time they were requiring you to pay 9 consecutive payments within a 10-month period in order to cure your default. They actually reduced it down to 6. I know that right now, since COVID, they deferred everyone's loan. So if you went into prison within the last 2 years or so, we don't run into that problem. But for those that have been there a while, normally about 15% of the people that we serve actually, in my opinion, give up and say, hey, it's not worth it, or I just don't have the money. And you can't earn too much money in prison other than giving blood, or the 4 or 5 cents an hour they give you for good times is not going to make it. So that's my experience with the institutions that I serve with Second Chance Pell.
Thank you, sir. I guess we never even considered that it could be possible that brothers and sisters are unable to make those rehab payments, even if they are as low as $5. So Barbie, does THEI have any measures in place to assist incarcerated prospective students in default?
Yeah, thank you, Louis, for the invite, and thank you for this panel.
In here.
To explain, THEI is kind of in a very unique position as a nonprofit facilitator and technical support provider for HEP programs across the state of Tennessee. So we work with all of the community colleges as well as the 4-year institutions who are currently in the HEP space in Tennessee. With that, we have both unique perspectives and a little extra leeway in what we can do. So prior to Fresh Start, we were, as everyone else was, noticing that probably 5 to 10% of our students were experiencing loan default. How do we know? One, the student will self-identify. So we, as Lauren does at Adams State, we begin a college prep session before anyone begins class. And during that college prep session, students will go ahead and self-identify. because typically, one, they're concerned that that will keep them out of education. So one, our answer to that is no. The second way we'll find out, sometimes the student doesn't even know that they're in default, is through FAFSA. So whichever way that comes, once we figure out a student is in default, then we will actually begin the on the ground, I guess, kind of pounding to a solution for the student. We will contact on their behalf the U.S. Department of Ed to find out who their loan servicer is. We'll complete the given U.S. Department of Ed third-party authorization forms to become a legal representative for our student to begin to handle the loan default situation. And again, as Lauren said, mailing anything from a servicer or the Department of Ed into a facility, you may have a 10% chance of it getting where it needs to go on time. So instead, we've been able to work with servicers to utilize our email and our fax options to actually go on ground into facilities to speak to folks about their loan default, have them complete any paperwork that's needed, and we can immediately fax that back to the servicer, thus cutting out the problem of lost mail, etc. Again, prior to Fresh Start, the options were an income-based repayment plan or an income-driven repayment plan. So with that, in Tennessee, our current definition of earned income is that no monies received while incarcerated counts toward the earned income qualification for the income-based repayment. So with that number at 0, we've been able to work out the very easy $5 a month payment. What I've experienced personally, those, as Dr. Andrews alluded to, that 9-month period will completely get you out of default, but a 3 to 6 month period will also allow you some leeway to receive a release letter from a servicer, thus allowing your Pell or federal funds to restart earlier than that. So what we've been able to do as a nonprofit is actually write this into our budget. So instead of a student paying the $5 allotment for 9 months, THEI will do that on their behalf, ensuring that the student comes completely out of default. And then since they are enrolled with us, they will go into deferment until they are no longer enrolled in education. So writing that into our budget has been extremely helpful because we don't have an option for a student who is in loan default to be kicked out of a class or to not have the same opportunity. That's not something that we want to see. So we want everyone on an even playing field. So we will do that groundwork. We'll make those 9-month payments. We will ensure that the student understands that loan rehabilitation is a once in a lifetime opportunity outside of Fresh Start. And then we will even coordinate with student and loved ones to ensure that they understand who the servicer is, what steps they will need to take post enrollment in an education program so that they don't go back into default.
You're muted, Louis.
You're muted, Louis.
I apologize. I clicked it. It just didn't unmute. But thanks, Barbie. You see that contingencies are vital. And I'm glad that THEI is taking accountability for finding solutions. Mayor, Project Rebound is a program that serves formerly incarcerated students in California who are pursuing their 4-year degrees. What does the admissions process for your program look like for a prospective student that's in default?
Yes, thank you, Luis. And I echo Barbie's sentiments. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. So basically, the admissions process for an individual who wishes, a formerly incarcerated individual, to pursue a 4-year degree here at our university. Currently, Project Rebound is at 16 of the 23 CSU campuses. So it's not just our campus, it's 16 of our campuses up and down the state of California. The process begins while they're still incarcerated in many instances. Students will write to us They'll let us know that they want to pursue a 4-year degree upon their release. And so the first thing we do is we have them fill out a questionnaire just to collect basic demographic information. How many units have they completed? Have they completed the Golden 4 requirements, which is a requirement for the CSU system? That includes English, basic composition, oral communication, critical thinking, and a math course, and then what schools they've attended. Once we get their unofficial transcripts, we send them down to admissions. Admissions will provide us with an assessment, and we'll then write to the student and say, yes, you do meet the admissions requirements, or no, you don't. These are the classes that you still need. And so the process begins while they're still in there. Once they come home and they come to our office, we will go ahead and renew their FAFSA application. It's at that time that we realize, the student has a loan in default or they don't. That's usually when it comes to light. Through the FAFSA website, Federal Student Aid website, it'll show who their loan processor is, who's got the loan. We'll then go ahead and assist the student in reaching out to that loan processor, and we'll have them apply for the Fresh Start program. Sometimes when students come home, if they come home mid-semester, we have some time to kind of process the paperwork, process their application, and get them ready for the upcoming semester. When students come home 3 or 4 months prior to the semester beginning, and we see that they've defaulted on a loan and we need to get them out of default, it can be taxing because it's basically a race against the clock. Surprisingly, of our, I would say, 400 or so students that have come through my office, only a small minority have had loans in default. We're very fortunate in California that we have the California Promise Grant, which ensures the first 2 years of any California resident's college education is free. So the state government basically pays for any individual who meets the income requirements, regardless if they have defaulted on loans, to get a free college education for their first 2 years. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mir. Now, Dr. Andrus, excuse me, in terms of raising awareness and educating incarcerated students about their student loan obligations and the potential consequences of default, what strategies or resources have you found to be effective in preparing them for the financial aid application process? You're muted, sir.
Okay, all right. Definitely in my experience working with the students all at different institutions, one of the things that we do, I think Ms. Barbara, someone stated that they have orientation. We go in with orientation, we talk to the students, let them know that, listen, if you have a problem, it's best for you to self-identify, because really we're wasting time a lot of time when when the institution run the financial aid transcripts out of FAFSA. On that financial aid transcript, normally it's going to come out that they've attended certain institutions, and if they're in default, really, in my opinion, what we do is set ourselves back. So we try to just tell the students, be honest, be upfront. If you know that you are in default, tell us, and there's a way to get you out, but you just have to be upfront with us. And that's basically the way that we deal with defaults at all of the different institutions that we work with. Just be upfront, and we let them know, if you had a problem, we understand that. A lot of times people are locked up 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years. They went to school, they didn't pay any money. Most of them can't pay when they're locked up behind bars. So just be upfront, and we try to work with them. That's my answer for that particular question.
Thank you, Dr. Andrus. Great, thanks for the insights. Lauren, are there any specific policy gaps or limitations in the current student financial aid system that disproportionately affect incarcerated students? And how would you improve those?
Thank you. I think that there always is room for improvement, specifically around, so Fresh Start has been really like helpful for our program and programs throughout the country. And that goes away at the end of the year, I think. It ends within a year. And then we'll have to go back to the process of dealing with loan defaults in the traditional way. And I think that's going to prohibit our program significantly. The other thing that we have seen has affected those applying for financial aid has to do with marital status. So if students have a partner outside, husband or wife, they have to file with their husband and wife's information. And so I think hopefully we can get rid of that requirement and make them be able to file as they have been separated. And then that will help us be able to push more people through with Pell. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, and we'll learn more as the new Pell reinstatement kind of expands. But those are the two biggest things that we've seen that will affect our program right now, and hope that they continue Fresh Start instead of getting rid of it, or have a program very similar for those who are incarcerated.
So I have a follow-up question for you, Lauren. Thanks for that answer. So the access to the information is obviously important to you, because we've even talked about that before. So do you have any suggestions on how we should get this information out to our students?
Oh, well, yes, I do. So I think access to information, I've been saying for a really long time that no one has the right information. Like even around Pell, the Department of Education and other entities that work in this field didn't do a really good job about messaging what Pell meant to our students. And so that is really frustrating for people who are inside. I get hundreds of calls that they don't know what it means. And so I think when we're thinking about what Fresh Start means, our students don't know. We have at Adams State created in collaboration with our financial aid director, Heidi, who I had mentioned before. She helped us create this like a fact sheet for all of our students, before Pell reinstatement started. And we're going to update that in the next couple months for what it means for students who are trying to apply for Pell now that the laws have changed. But there is not enough information out there. People think that programs need to know the information, but the students don't seem to be part of that. And across the board, wish that they would be able to communicate better to our students or potential students inside the prison. They have definitely been forgotten with Pell reinstatement.
Thank you so much. With regard to that, Dr. Andrus, you and I had spoke before about implementation of technology into your program. Do you see a way that technology can play a role in disseminating that proper information to our students?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We are excited. I love working with technology. I really do. As a matter of fact, one of the schools that I'm currently working with, we just signed a contract in South Carolina. I'm working with them right now on rolling out their Second Chance Pell program. And the institutions that the state chose for them are like 2 hours, 2.5 hours away, both of the institutions. And, for professors to drive out 2.5 hours to go to class at institutions when some of them have to have classes in the afternoon, that to me is kind of, that's almost a no-no. But anyway, we, with technology, I'm going to mention APDS again, because that's who I primarily, work with, and I try to roll out their technology, American Prison Data System. Technology is a godsend for institutions, even in Louisiana where we work at, and Texas now is trying to introduce some tablet programs. They still kind of shaky about introducing those programs in the penal institution in Texas. But I do believe that the wave of the future will be tablets using the intranet. They work perfectly with the institutions that we serve in certain, like Louisiana, Georgia, and Alabama. These tablets are working really well. It's almost like really communicating face to face with your professors. The only thing is we cannot use any kind of cameras or any video conferencing. We can't do that right now, but there are some institutions in Louisiana, Lake Providence, that's thinking about allowing us to use video conferencing. And if we're able to do that, really, there would be no difference between what we do with our online students in the traditional programs than, you know, what we'll be doing with the Second Chance Pell students. And it's very effective. I love it. Students are able to email their professors if they don't understand something. And the emails are pretty much in real time. You know, if I email you right now, if you're at your computer, you'll get it probably within a minute or so or less, just like, you know, any other email coming from a student. So I just think that that's outstanding. And I definitely would, you know, ask everyone who's working with Second Chance Pell to consider just at least looking into technology.
So Dr. Andrus, are professors able to upload information? Are third parties
Yes.
able to upload information into these tablets?
That's the beauty of it. You know, I know about Khan Academy and some of these other things, you know, I can't think of the other big deal, but, you know, I know about some of these programs. But I'll say this, with us, we're able to actually go into Canvas and upload content in those APDS tablets. And if you're familiar with that platform, that learning management system, man, is very effective. You know, you can, if you know Canvas and Moodle, I don't want to say nothing bad about no other LMS, but I love Canvas, and first we use it at Wiley College to be, you know, we use Canvas, so all the professors are familiar with it. So using that platform on those APDS tablets is a godsend, and we try to, you know, explain to different institutions that, hey, if you're already using Canvas and you can use these tablets, you know, hey, you know, it's seamless what we do, and the professors love it, and it's your own content, so you don't have to worry about using somebody else's material. You upload your own content, and you're able, just like you would do for your traditional classes at your institution, you're able to do the same thing with the prison institution, and I think it's wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Andrus.
Yes, sir.
Barbie, what initiatives can programs take to alleviate this burden for their states? Like, so it's for their students, excuse me. So you already talked about how you guys at THEI take the onus on yourselves to actually write into your budget items like this. What other initiatives can programs take? What other partnerships can they form in order to alleviate this burden for their students?
Great question, Louis.
Thank you.
So yeah, we as a nonprofit have the availability to seek funding specifically for what we're aiming at, of course. Thus, we can write it into our budget. In all transparency, something like this, dealing with loan default pre and post Fresh Start, takes capacity to do this and creativity to do it. Capacity because it can take a while. I can't say that any one step is incredibly hard, but there are so many steps. So the capacity to do that, creating the capacity to do that is important. And creativity. Right now, we don't necessarily have direct guidelines on how to handle default for an incarcerated borrower outside of Fresh Start. With that, whatever we do is going to be groundbreaking, and it may seem a little scary at first, because truthfully, you've probably never heard of it because it hasn't been done yet. So I would challenge folks to look at, if you have the availability, if you are a nonprofit, seek funding to cover not only those 9 months of payments, but also the burden of tuition during those payment periods prior to reinstatement. And speaking of that tuition, we can look at creative options of lessening tuition costs for those months. If you are a nonprofit educational institution, you have some leeway in what you can charge for your education. You also have greater leeway with the grants and funding opportunities for your students, maybe a scholarship that covers 6 months just for defaulted students. You know, I mean, possibilities are endless because we don't have any limitations right now. So as we go and do this on the ground, we can see, I guess, little openings, little light coming in through some cracks. We can attack those cracks and be creative and create opportunities for our students to continue with as little financial burden during their education as possible. And if you do have that capacity, then you can even take on the burden of those individual steps for your student as well. So really capacity and being creative in cost of tuition and in ways of addressing the defaulted student situation.
Thank you, Barbie. So as a former HEP student, I can say that it's a blessing to have a program that does all they can to invest in its students. Mir, my final question is for you. Are there any specific support services or resources that you believe would greatly benefit incarcerated or formerly incarcerated students who are struggling with defaulted student loans and limited access to financial aid?
Absolutely, Luis. You know, something that I've done in my past couple of years here as an academic counselor for Project Rebound is seek out resources. You know, I think as a formerly incarcerated person myself, education was definitely high on my priority list when I came home from prison, but having money in my pocket, having resources, you know, what good is going to school if I don't have a roof over my head, if I don't have transportation, if I don't have food in my refrigerator? And so, you know, when I assumed this position, I sought out resources everywhere. I looked high and low, and I was told about a resource called the California Department of Rehabilitation, the DOR. It is an amazing, amazing resource. I call it one of our state's best kept secrets. It is a state-run agency, has been around since the early 60s, early to mid 60s. And I drew a parallel between the population they serve and the population that I am a member of. And so just a brief synopsis of who the DOR is. The Department of Rehabilitation was established by the federal government in the early 60s to help people with disabilities overcome obstacles to employment. They are present in all 50 states. So it is a federally funded program. Every state oversees their own Department of Rehabilitation. Here in California, we refer to it as the DOR, Department of Rehab. In other states, it's known by something else, but if you simply Google it, their website pops up. Now, the parallel that we drew between formerly incarcerated students and the population that the DOR serves is that I've come to the realization that many justice impacted individuals have disabilities of some sort, whether it's a physical disability, a learning disability, post-traumatic stress disorder, post-prison traumatic stress disorder, emotional disabilities, physical disabilities. I mean, the list goes on and on. Whether they acquired those disabilities as a result of their incarceration experience, or whether they had this disability and it just went undiagnosed, it's no secret that individuals who come into contact with the criminal justice system have a lack of access to healthcare. And so many of these individuals were never diagnosed with a disability. So what we have done is we reached out to our local DOR office. We said we have this population of students who are coming home from prison, and we realized that some of them may have learning disabilities, some may have emotional disabilities, or even physical disabilities. I myself identify as a person with a physical disability. I am paralyzed. I use a wheelchair to get around. And so I qualified for services. Now, somebody who may not appear to have a disability, invisible disabilities do exist. You know, our society, when we think of disability, automatically it conjures up images of wheelchairs, walkers, amputees, braces, but disability comes in so many different forms. And so when I speak to a student for the first time and they come in, we have this talk about a disability. You know, do you have an anxiety disorder? from being incarcerated for so long? Did you do time in solitary confinement? Did you have depression while you were in there? We don't like talking about these things while we're incarcerated because, you know, disability has a negative stigma inside of prison and outside of prison. So when a student acknowledges that, you know what, I may have a disability, I don't have any documentation, I've never seen a psychiatrist, I've never seen a psychologist, I've never seen a doctor, we here at Project Rebound can actually acknowledge that a person has a disability. The Department of Rehabilitation has made it very easy for service providers to acknowledge that a person may have a disability. They have their own assessments that individuals will go through, and at the end of the day, they will deem whether this person has one. I'm sorry, I thought I heard something. So long story short, once a student goes to the DOR office, they establish the fact that they have a disability. Next, you have to connect your higher education journey to your employment goals. So if a person comes to our office and says, I want to be an attorney, well, you need a law degree to go to law school. You need a bachelor's degree to go to law school before you can get that law degree. And so the DOR will support our students with a bachelor's degree and then a law degree if that's what they want to do. If they want to become a medical professional, they will support them with their nursing degree, with their doctorate. And so you have to be able to tie their disability to their employment goals and then their college education to their employment goals. Once their IPE, which is their individualized plan for employment, is developed, the DOR will fund their education for the duration of their degree. There's no time limit. If a student has a learning disability and they can only do 2 classes at once, they can't do 4 classes like everybody else, the DOR will fund those 2 classes or those 4 classes. Now, there is a caveat to this. The DOR says you must first apply for financial aid. Financial aid has to apply to your tuition before we can step in, because you can't double dip. You can't say, I'm going to get financial aid and then, hey, DOR, I also want your federal funds to pay for my tuition. The DOR says, show us that you apply for financial aid. And if financial aid, for whatever reason, such as loan defaults, such as outstanding money that you owe them, whatever the reason is, if you still have an outstanding balance by the time the semester starts, DOR, no questions asked, pays for your tuition, and it is money you do not have to pay back. I personally have been with the DOR for many years now. They helped me finish my bachelor's degree, they financed my master's degree, and they are now financing my PhD. I'm getting ready to start my 2nd year, and it's an amazing resource, amazing resource. As I mentioned, I grew up in New York. I still keep in touch with a lot of my friends over there. And if they share with me that, you know, their systems involved, you know, because we kind of lose track of one another, but they tell me they just got out of jail. Hey, you know what? Look up the New York State Department of Rehabilitation, get connected with them. And if you need any help, reach out to me and let me know. But it's an amazing resource. I highly, highly encourage whatever state you're located in to reach out to the DOR and your state's DOR and get connected with them and establish that relationship.
Thanks, Mayor. Being creative and finding our resources, either way, whether it's for our students or for ourselves, is very important. Thanks for that information. So I want to thank you all for your insights. Now I'll be turning over the reins to Brian Megan, our chat moderator, for a Q&A session from the chat.
Lou, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for hosting.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to acknowledge, Mir, that it is also Disability Pride Month, and that Kayla posted in the chat. So congratulations, Kayla, about that also. That's fantastic. So my first question from the chat is from Charlotte West. Prior to Fresh Start, were any of the colleges here able to cover the $5 a month for the 9-month payment, for the 9 payments? I saw a few colleges use COVID funds to cover that for the students who were incarcerated. Now, Barbie, I know you had mentioned that your organization puts aside the money. Does anyone else have any commentary for that question?
I know that with the institutions that we serve, this is Trey Sanders, none of them have money. Now, we do have a special program at Wiley College where I offered through my foundation, Trey Sanders Foundation, to pay for some things, but it was not for default. It was for like transcripts that students needed. But as far as default, the answer is no. No one that I know of with any of the institutions that we serve have money set aside to pay to get students reinstated if they are in default.
So let me repeat the question because apparently I might have been covering the microphone. Hold on. So prior to Fresh Start, were any of the colleges here able to cover the $5 a month for the 9 payments? I saw a few colleges. Sorry, question just disappeared. I saw a few colleges use COVID funds to cover that for their students who were incarcerated. Okay, then we're going to move on to the next question. One barrier we saw with our incarcerated students, this is from Haddon Sutton, and one barrier we saw with our incarcerated students who are incarcerated as an FSA ID to apply for financial aid or check on student loan status is that FSA ID frequently gets disabled by student aid. We're not sure why this is happening, but it makes it difficult to help students check their federal student aid status. Has anyone encountered this? Yes, Lauren.
Yeah, so that kind of goes into why we started using the paper applications. This is Heidi Markey. She's our director of financial aid. She couldn't get on the link, so she came into the office so she could be here. And so I wanted to introduce her. She's done miracles with our students to be able to get through the process. But as I said, when we first brought Heidi in and we were trying to apply our students online, we ran into this problem of like a verification. So if a parent had applied to us for a student's financial aid while they were incarcerated, they didn't know their FSA ID and didn't have the PIN number to be able to get online access. And so we were doing like a circle around with the DOC people were really working hard to try to make this happen so that they could apply online. And then the other issue that we ran into was that if someone had applied to financial aid before even coming, that they wouldn't have even known what email that they had 10 years ago, or remembered any way to get into that. And then the DOC also couldn't access their personal email to find out, to get the like verification numbers that they were going to. So it was a huge barrier, and we went into doing the paper application because of that, and that's how we'll go forward. But I don't know if Heidi had any more insight.
The thing yes, we found the paper application, we just whizzed right through it. And what we did was, we researched all of our students' default status prior to meeting with them, which really helped because we were able to separate our students into 2 groups because our Fresh Start student needed a little extra TLC, but everybody ended up completing the paper application. And then we were able to enter it for them. One thing that I am concerned about is that under the FAFSA's new Simplification Act, we will no longer be able to enter a FAFSA for our students. I just learned that at the NASFA conference, so I have to research how that's going to impact us. But what I was told was that it's now going to add an additional barrier because the students are going to be required to submit the application under their own ID. And so I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know if that's been addressed yet.
No, thank you.
And that will be starting in 24-25. So there's additional barriers that we're looking at here.
Thank you, Lauren and Heidi. And Heidi, thank you for being able to join us. We appreciate it. This question is for Barbie. What suggestions do you have for programs who can't yet afford to write these assistance that you're writing into your budgets what advice do you have for other organizations looking to add those stipulations into their budget requirements?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, I would say that, you know, we don't have a shortage of money in this country. We just need to figure out how to get it. So just encouraging, first of all, to seek out that funding. Second, you also have options such as, and this goes back to Charlotte's question as well. We have experienced colleges who, although we will pay the 9-month $5 fee, colleges have agreed to drastically lower their tuition. So if a university or a college can't necessarily write it into their own budget at this point to cover all of the financial obligations, partnering with a nonprofit or another third party outside of themselves to maybe help out with that situation, while at the same time, if you have the availability, offering a reduced tuition to allow for easier access for the student and that third party to accelerate that process is extremely helpful, extremely helpful.
Thank you, Barbie. And this will be our last question, is from Charlotte West. I know all of the colleges who are enrolling students are working with them on bringing loans into good standing through Fresh Start, but I'd be curious how information about Fresh Start is being disseminated to people who are not current students. Seems like it would be an important part of re-entry counseling for people who wanted to restart their education after release.
I can kind of jump in and say something. I agree with you,
Thank you.
Charlotte, 100% that we need to be communicating this more. But Fresh Start ends soon. And so we need to figure out what the new ways of getting out of loan default will be. And then start communicating that to them as well. And Heidi, do you know what day that ends, Fresh Start?
Yes, I have it pulled up here. It's in August of about a year from now.
Yeah.
It will end.
So when that ends, we're all going to be in a lot of trouble trying to get these people out of loan default. And then if they're trying to get, or if they're getting out after August, Fresh Start wouldn't be what they need to know about. So how do we start getting more information to everybody in prison, not just people who are in our program? And we have like over 600 students throughout 360 facilities, but we can only reach those students. Like, how do we start reaching the, millions of other people who might need this information? And what can the Department of Education do to ensure that people who are in prison are getting the same information that they can get on the outside? So there's a huge, I think, a barrier to our students in communication, or to our people in communication always. And we have to be more determined to get them the information that they need.
That is very true. Communication is definitely one of the biggest barriers. Barbie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, thanks. If I could add to that, in Tennessee at the state level, the Tennessee Board of Regents has a great model with the Tennessee Reconnect Navigators. So within prison facilities during reentry counseling, if someone thinks that they may want to continue education, then they'll go ahead and meet with a TBR funded Tennessee Reconnect Navigator that can begin that process. And when they begin the financial aid process, they will, just like we do, find out that a student is in default and can offer more information and ways to solve that for students who aren't necessarily currently enrolled. It's just anyone who is about to leave a facility has that option in Tennessee.
Thank you very much, Barbie. And that is it for the Q&A, so I will hit it back to Lou. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you panelists and those who attended. Thank you for attending. We hope this was an informative session. We'd like to invite you to join us on August 23rd at 2 p.m. for part 3 of this series, which will be entitled Access Denied, the Fight for Equal Access. And we will be speaking to policymakers and policy advocates about how we got here and what do we do going forward in order to alleviate and resolve this process. So again, thank you guys. This was a great panel, great experience.